Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to The Ark, a show where we learn more about the people of Holy Trinity Cathedral. You know, when we think about a church, we compare it to a ship, and there are many different people and many different components on that ship with different personalities, very unique skill sets. And so for a cathedral this large, we have many people that make up the ship that is the Holy Trinity Cathedral, or what we like to call the Ark. So we thank you for joining us for this brand new show and for this premiere episode. And I'm very fortunate to welcome for our first guest of the show somebody who knows Holy Trinity well. He has grown up in this cathedral and has served in many different roles at this church. And now he and his family have begun a new chapter in their lives and in the lives of the cathedral as he is getting ready to complete his first year as our Parish Council President. So with that, we welcome Mr. Peter Thomopoulos. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So I want you to tell our viewers, as you began your life here in Charlotte, take us through your childhood and how the faith was a part of your upbringing and in your family's lives, and how the faith was taught to you as a young person.
Sure. So we moved to Charlotte in 1987. I was 7 years old, and we actually came here from Greece. We moved here, and we were living with an uncle of mine, and we came. This was the only church, the only Greek Orthodox church, and so we began to attend, and it continued. Like I said, I started here as a 7-year-old, so my mom was bringing me regularly participating in soccer, church services, Sunday school, Greek school, all of the above. My parents got divorced around the age of 12 for me, and my mom continued. So my mom was not born into the Orthodox Church. She actually was born and raised Catholic, which I guess is our sister church, so it's pretty close. But she always felt it important to bring us, keep us consistently active. We would participate in what used to be a very vibrant Fos and Joya Wednesdays, where we'd come together to have dinners. The adults would go off and have their classes with, at that time it was Father C. The children would break off and go have their classes and so forth. And so I'd say probably between my mom being an instrumental part of church and my faith, I'd say the second biggest component for me was when I got to the age to serve as an altar boy. It was instrumental to me and informative because I began to learn the components, the ins and outs of the liturgy. It was also a special time because there were 2 or 3 of us that would consistently come every Sunday, no matter what. I think I actually would participate in the altar more than I went to Sunday school, quite frankly. It was a good excuse. I'd rather be in the altar than to be in class those days. But probably the most meaningful times, I guess meaningful times in that period of my life were some of the quieter times where it would be me and a couple of the other altar boys. I remember distinctly Father John Emmanuelson through a part of that era where we'd be in the first liturgy, and there wouldn't be a lot of people in the service. We'd be just kind of chugging along, and you could sit and you could feel and you could sense Christ. You could sense our faith. I felt the faith, right. Which is hard to describe. That's why I'm kind of stumbling for words. But I think is one of the most important pieces to people's journey in faith. You have to find that moment or those moments pieced together where you are truly feeling it. It's not just I'm saying it. We can recite the creed 100 times a day, but if it's not felt, it just doesn't hold that same meaning. You got it, and so that experience, I think, was pivotal for me. As I grew up, I continued to participate. I'm not a saint. I've not been every Sunday. I've not done the best that I could, but I've been active, and I recognize it as a need of mine and a component of my life, and so I continue to persevere and try to become better.
Sure, absolutely. I find it interesting in talking with people who went through difficulties, in their early ages, whether it's the divorce or a loss of a parent or a loss of a grandparent. And I find there's a dichotomy of people who stray from the church when the going gets tough, and then there are people who turn to the church when the going gets tough. So it's nice to hear that your mom said, times are rough, but we're going to keep going, because I assume that was probably hers and your foundation.
I agree. So, granted, my mom had her foundation from her early years, but I think it's also important to recognize the relational component of that journey to faith. I know in my discussions with my mom, her relationship with Father C or Father John and various priests throughout the years, I think were a key component, right? If I find the same example that you say. You can find yourself at that fork in the road when things get really difficult, and some turn away, some turn towards. And I think those that turn towards, more than often, turn towards because they have a relationship, they have a connection. I think that's why it's so important to have a spiritual father or somebody that you trust, that you share that faith with. I think that's a component we need to expand as a community, and that is our sharing of our faith amongst ourselves. We come and we meet, and there are certainly opportunities where we express our faith and we're in union and in communion with each other, but I think that's an area where we can definitely improve, and that is where we are amongst each other sharing and discussing our faith, where we're having, whether it's a Bible study or whether it's just an expression of spirituality or talking about what we feel or think. I think that's an important component of how we can grow together and grow closer as a community, where it's not just a familial or group, or we're from the same cordio or what it is, where we're sharing in really the root of our connection, and that is our faith. That is at the center of what makes somebody a member of this church, and sharing and talking and experiencing that faith together is, I think, vital. Our priests are wonderful, and they do a lot, and we have to turn to them. We should turn to them. We also have to find our friends and family that we can turn to and express that faith, where we can talk through those experiences. Because at the end of the day, it may seem like we've got a lot of priests, we've got 3, but in a parish that's got over 1,000 families, it's just not feasible for our priests to be there every second, every day of the week and of the year. And so if we can expand our circle, and we can find our friends and family and talk through our faith, I think it helps us to grow stronger in our faith, and it also provides us those relationships to lean to and look to when things happen or when things get challenged. so that we're not tempted to just stray away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because since coming back to Holy Trinity full time, I think it's been those experiences and those circles that I've had to rely on, because unlike, like you mentioned, many of the parishioners here at Holy Trinity, I've got no relatives at this church.
Yeah.
Even though my family has been in the Charlotte area since the 80s, this wasn't our first church. We don't come from the two main areas of Greece that this community is represented by. So you're right. It's finding those relationships and those experiences just beyond the social aspect of our lives, and really connecting on a spiritual level, because while the priests, like you said, are our mentors and they're our spiritual fathers, they're here to enlighten us and encourage us and set the example so that we can take hold of that and then go on with that, so that this not only is a community of friends and family and of good people, but of spiritual people and people who rely on each other as much as they do the priests. So I think it's a good thing that you bring up. So you're involved in the altar, like you said, different ministries of the church as you're growing up. So what happens after you graduate high school?
So I stayed local. I started off right after high school. I actually did an apprenticeship as a machinist fabricator, where I was going to community college and working full-time. Subsequently, once I completed that 4-year apprenticeship, I continued my schooling at UNC Charlotte, completing my engineering degree. Became an engineer, worked for a number of years as an engineer in the Charlotte area, and still had the itch for schooling. Continued on and did my MBA at Wake Forest, and then finally I was done with school. and around that time is actually when I got married. Actually, I got married right before I did the grad school. In terms of my connection with the church, I continued to participate. I'd say it was right around the period of when I was graduating high school, where for some of the new members, it's not well known, but there was a lot of friction. There was issues that arose here at Holy Trinity that I'd say momentarily turned me away. Not away from the church, but just away from the community, because there was just a lot of ugliness. It wasn't what I was seeking. And then I had the great fortune of going to confession one day with Father Michael, I think it was. And I expressed these issues and how I felt and where I was spiritually. And he made a valiant point that what we believe in is the faith. We believe in God, we believe in Christ. Humans, we're imperfect and we make lots of mistakes. Mm-hmm. And as long as we understand what it is that we believe in, we don't believe in the people that are making the mistakes today. We believe in Christ. And if we stay focused on that, it helps us deal with those mistakes along the way. And so I found myself, again, getting reconnected, wanting to be more involved. And I can't recall if I think it was after I got married and after I was done with school that I think it was Father Philemon asked me to participate in the stewardship ministry. Mm-hmm. And he went a little around the corner to kind of loop me in. He didn't say join the stewardship committee. He said, I've got this other side committee to help me kind of feed into the stewardship. But somehow it managed to grow right into the stewardship committee. Yes. But I served on that stewardship committee, and it grew, and it has continued to grow. And that committee has been very insightful. Simultaneously, I ran for parish council and joined the parish council, served my full 3 years. And then I reached a point in my life, or really my business career, professional career, where I had to travel a lot. And I just couldn't consistently and confidently participate in the parish council meetings, and so I stepped away while I focused on it. I mean, I was still active, but I'm only going to do it if I can commit to it and be there 100%. And I couldn't at that time, so I stepped away, watched my girls continue to grow, and I guess it was last year, the year before, I decided it was time to go ahead and join the parish council again, and so I did. And as Dino Pappas was our president up until last year, he came off the board, and so an opportunity came up, and I stepped up to it. I was a willing participant to become president. You know, it's unlike our U.S. politics going on right now. The parish council president isn't as eagerly sought after the role. so I didn't have a lot of competition, but I'm proud, and I'm humbled as well that my fellow parish council members elected me and have put their faith in me to lead. So I'm doing my best. It's been a tumultuous year. I did not expect to have as many highs and lows as we've had, but that's life. So here we are.
Amen to that. And we thank you for your work.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as somebody who has spent many of your years here at Holy Trinity, here in Charlotte, when you assumed the role of the president of the parish council, what were some things that were going through your head? Because I'm sure, given that responsibility, given that position, you were probably thinking, all right, I've seen things come and go in this church. I've seen people come and go. I've seen ideas and projects, come and go, both physically, tangibly, and also within the ministry life of the church. So what were some of your initial thoughts about what you wanted to accomplish as president?
So I wanted to accomplish a number of things. I didn't want to mess it up. We had a lot of good things going. We've had very good momentum. I truly think the renovation of our courtyard and cathedral was instrumental to showing people what can be done. I think, again, things have continued to evolve and improve. Our community continues to grow. So step one was just not to mess that up. Don't do something that creates a problem that is unnecessary, or So that was one thing. The other thing was definitely, I think, tied to our stewardship. Having spent as many years on the stewardship committee and been on and off the parish council and been an active member, I recognize that is probably one of the biggest areas of improvement for our community. And I say that because a lot of folks don't understand or aren't aware of a lot of the details of what's going on in and out of the cathedral day to day. The big stuff, people get very excited and very involved. When we do a big project like the courtyard or the pew refinishing or iconography in the chapel. People get very excited and very interested and motivated. When we announced that we had to cancel the festival, people got very excited and looked for ways to help, and are continuing to look for ways to help. And they've done an incredible amount. And at the same point, our financial stewardship, but even in our physical and participation, I think we've got lots of room to improve. We find a lot of the same people running for offices or taking care of the administrative tasks, helping in the office, running our various ministries. It's a lot of the same people that rotate in and out. And while that's incredible and should be applauded and appreciated, again, in a community of over 1,000 families, I find it hard to believe that we can't spread that load a little bit better. We have a lot of talent, an incredible amount of talent. Things like the video ministry and manning the booth and making sure. I'm confident that we have probably twice as many or 3 times as many people as we currently have active and participating that would be interested and would love to learn the technology and help in handling it and coordinating and managing that ministry. So I would really love for us to shift our focus and start to think about what we're good at, what we like to do. So sometimes we have things we're really good at, but we're tired of doing them all the time because maybe that's our job. We don't want to do that. We really want to do something else for our church. Right. It's something else that excites us, whether it's this helping with the soup kitchen, helping in some other form. I'd love to refocus our attention and start asking our folks, what are you good at and what do you want to do? And then let's find the position in the ministry that fits that talent and that interest. So that we can get folks involved and educated and participating. And I think what will happen is as people get involved and educated and participating, I firmly believe the financial component comes into play as well. Talking finances is uncomfortable in the church. We don't come to church to talk about money. But at the end of the day, we still have to pay for the lights, we still have to pay for the priests, we still have to pay for the books, the various components that make up our overall service and ministry. And that's not even getting into what we really want to do, and that is to become outward looking, outward facing. What inspires me is to be able to go out or contribute to things like the soup kitchen, to things like just something so beautiful as the St. Hermione home that is being initiated by Father Paul Tsahakis, and quite honestly, St. Thaddeus is really at the core of that. But I feel 100% confident that our parish here at Holy Trinity would openly support that, because it is an expression of our faith, it is an expression of our love for the Lord and how we can share our many gifts. But again, we can't, it's easier for us to get very excited and do that, but what has occurred perpetually for as long as I can recall is we have done it at the expense of the basic needs of 600 East Boulevard, of this church and community. And so right now we're at a deficit. It's a significant deficit that's not being made up because we don't have the festival. We've talked about it at length for a number of years. it's finally here. We canceled the festival. We're no longer, this year, we cannot depend on our friends and neighbors of the Charlotte community to help pay our basic bills. We have to come out of pocket. We have to have those uncomfortable conversations and talk about the reality of our finances, and that while we have wonderful endowments that have incredible value, they're restricted. You know, we can't tap into them for the day-to-day funds. And so that was a focus of my initial start of presidency. It took a different form once COVID hit, and I've tried to educate myself on how we can improve, but we still got a lot of work to do. So that's one of the other things. I'd say the last thing is to get a little bit more efficient in our day-to-day administration and communication. It's challenging with a community the size of ours, and I know we're not the only ones this size, but I've found it challenging. The emails don't always work, the letters don't always work, and quite frankly, we don't have volunteers to go call every member of the church. And so if we can get more volunteers and more folks involved and saying, you know what, I've got extra time. I'm stuck at home because of COVID. I'm single and want to do something. I can be part of a phone tree to reach out or do, you know, that could be an area where then we could improve our communication, improve our efficiency, and everybody could know and understand what's going on, so that it's not a surprise when we have to shift a time for a liturgy, or when we have to scramble to react to something. So I think that's it.
So I remember at the beginning of the year, right around the time I believe that you assumed the role of presidency, we had a very momentous occasion here at the cathedral when we not only welcomed the Archbishop of America, Epilepharos, to our cathedral, but we also welcomed His Beatitude, Archbishop Chrysostomos of Cyprus.
That's right.
I think the first time our cathedral has ever hosted two heads of churches at one time,
right,
which was pretty significant, I'm sure, a pretty momentous events as you began your presidency. As conversations have evolved this year, as we've adapted to what is life now, you know, in the midst of a global pandemic, what are the objectives right now of the Parish Council? What, as the representatives of the parish, have you sat down and said, okay, here's the hand we've been dealt with. How can we ensure that the ministries of our church and the programs and the people of our church continue to be fed during this time? And maybe what are some projects that are going on right now, even while we're trying to maneuver through the coronavirus?
Sure. So this has been an area of extensive discussion, and really the bottom line focus, I think we have to look at it in phases. At the very early phases of COVID and the pandemic, we obviously knew the least about the virus. And so the reaction was swift and very strong, right? So we had to shut down the church. We moved extremely quickly to establish a video connectivity, improving from our first days of working off of a phone to having a full audio-video system, reaching out to people that were willing and able to help pay for that. Getting that established was that first phase. That was the high adrenaline, high rush, everybody, all hands on deck, get it done, because we don't want to go any longer than we have to without our church. So that got established, and then then we started to look at what would it look like to open? What would we need to do to open up again? And part of that had to do with government mandates and local and state and federal. And so we finally hit the point where we were going to be allowed to open. And it was going to be, we were allowed to open at 50% capacity and provide spacing. So we looked at all of the criteria. We imposed the masks, we imposed the distancing, and so we got through that. We got to be back in our cathedral, even though we had to step out because of the pews. And then I think as we started going through the summer and started getting closer to the fall season, where really naturally our cathedral, our community kind of really livens up. Obviously with the festival being the Kickstarter, but we get into fall sports, Sunday school starting, all of those things. And that's when the conversations became more difficult. It became more difficult because we still didn't really have clarity on how to do it, because I don't know that there is a 100% right answer, right? We've seen other communities, take steps different than ours. I think at the core of our conversations, though, it's been how can we open up, how can we get our parishioners, our youth involved while also maintaining their safety and ensuring that everybody is comfortable, right? We have plenty of members that feel very comfortable, would love to see it opened up 100%, get rid of the masks, we put our faith in the Lord. And at the same time, we have a number of parishioners that feel very strongly, they're not comfortable with that, right? They're not willing to take that kind of risk. They're not there yet. And so balancing our respect for both views has been really at the core of our conversations. And what can we do? So obviously we've opened up, since we've had the pews in, we're testing out something a little bit new where we don't have the physical tape in between. We're trying to space, individual people with families so we can maximize our capacity while also maintaining the safety of our people. We want folks to be able to come and freely and comfortably pray and join in communion. We don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable or unable to participate. We took the steps with Sunday school to move to a virtual platform. Other than, I think we're looking for opportunities of bringing in classes to have gatherings periodically, so we can still have that in person, because there's just nothing that replaces that in-person communication, that in-person touch, right? We've started up the soccer, following the guidelines of the conference. So we're looking at, again, more of those opportunities for other Christians doing the married couples. We've got young adults with Father Jonathan. Father Vasilios is, God bless him, he's driving all over Charlotte to try to talk to as many people as he can. And we're still trying to maintain that virtual connection, because the reality is even when we get to full normal, we open completely back up. The reality is some people need that virtual connection. They cannot physically come here, or whether it's because of work schedule, whether it's because of physical incapacity, those virtual connections are important. And I think we learned that. We learned how to maximize that early, but we've also gotten a little fatigued by it. So we've got to figure out that balance of how to open up, how to find opportunities to bring us together, gather, celebrate life, celebrate our faith, and then simultaneously provide the opportunity for those that need that virtual connection. So,
definitely not something that was included in the Metropolis Parish Council training.
no.
How to deal with church in a worldwide pandemic.
That's right. I tell you what, though, we are. There's no better day than today to start, and we are starting to put thoughts down on an emergency plan. What happens in an emergency? We had to cancel our General Assembly for the spring, right? We're coming up on the Fall Assembly, where we'll have in person as well as virtual. And so we need to establish those protocols. What is the authority? What happens in cases? Because it's COVID this year, but who knows what happens next year or 5 years from now or 20 years from now. And it'd be better for us to plan and make sure that our bylaws are in order, our regulations are in order, to be prepared and know what to do. When we go to the shelf, we pull the book down and we say, okay, this is what we're allowed to do in this scenario, this is how we handle it, this is how we communicate, all those kinds of things. We've got to start thinking about those situations so that we can be proactive and not reactive.
Right.
I think some would say we took some liberties this year. I think the bylaws explicitly call for two general assemblies. And we're not going to have it. But I'd rather in the future, for the future generations, whoever it is that comes after me or the person after me, to have that written down, to understand, to say, okay, we've all reviewed it, we've all agreed, this is acceptable under these circumstances, this is how you go back to normal.
I think that's so important because so many times this year we've had to think on our feet.
Yeah.
We've had to have emergency meetings to figure out what the next day is going to look like. You know, as things constantly change day by day. And then, you know, throw in the multitude of other things that were going on in the church, especially with the renovation of the cathedral. Which, might I say, if you guys have not come to church in the last 2 weeks, as we've now moved our services back into the cathedral, I hope you get a chance to. You'll notice some changes, but I think it just improves the character of the cathedral and of the sanctuary with the new carpet in the flooring and with the restoration of the pews, which are beautiful. And also, if you haven't seen, we've also relocated the choir downstairs next to the chanters, which have a little bit more space now. And we hope there's a day, one day soon, that our choir will be able to join us again to sing. But if you haven't joined us for worship, we hope and pray that you join us soon to see the revamped look of the cathedral. So Peter, let me ask you this. As we don't know what the future looks like, we never do, but especially now, there's the future, as in tomorrow, we don't know what it looks like. What are your goals from now moving forward? You know, you talked about stewardship. You talked about improving the spiritual connections of our people in the community. But knowing what you know, doing what you've done since the beginning of your presidency, at the beginning of the year, what are some things that, regardless of if you continue your presidency for another year, which I'm biased, I hope you do, but
Thank you.
what are some things that, you know, the church should look forward to the years to come? What are some things you want to accomplish? Having in mind that we're getting ready to celebrate a very important milestone in our life of the church in a few years with the centennial.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think what comes to mind right now is, I want to focus on engagement. I want to focus on driving more engagement. And it goes back to some of the points that I made earlier. I want us to look at identifying the talents and the interests of our many parishioners then find the opportunities for those parishioners. I think one of the things we would be, it would be a huge gift to have one or two people or even three people, however many people we find that is focused on collecting information from our parishioners on their talents and on their interests, and focused on how to connect those talents and those interests to the various needs in the church or the various ministries or activities. So I'd like to see us move towards that. And that's a ministry in and of itself, right? It's persons connecting people to a need. So I think that focus is one. I recently wrote my article for The Voice, and I won't go into all the details. I'll let everybody else read that. But I also want to reframe and clarify the expectations, and that is the expectations of the church from the community. What do we as a church expect from our parishioners? And simultaneously and equally, what do our parishioners expect from the church and the community? Right? So if we start to rethink about what it means to be a member, we have what's written in our bylaws, and it ultimately amounts to a stewardship or pledge card where we decide which ministry we'd like to participate in. We make a financial pledge and we sign it. We do that annually. It's a requirement every year. A lot of people don't know that, forget that, intentionally or not intentionally, but that is our current premise.
And you can't vote in a General Assembly without being a steward and a member,
Absolutely,
correct?
correct. But if we can reframe that to be an annual pledge of what I expect and what is expected of me, and that commitment, I think it changes it's a little bit of a paradigm shift. It changes the dynamic a little bit. It clarifies the expectation, because the expectation is not to put a 0 on that pledge card. The expectation is not to simply sign it and not participate. The expectation from the church is that you are active, that you participate in the ministries, whether it's coming to Sunday school, whether it's participating in dance, whether it's in the helping with the soup kitchen, helping with Philoptophos, joining the stewardship committee, whatever it is, the expectation is that you are actively participating in everyday life of this church and community. That it's not that you are just writing a check. I want everybody to join our church, but what we're not looking for is just somebody to sit at home and just send a check. We want folks to join us, and what I would hope the expectation is that as parishioners, the reason we join a church, the reason we choose to come to a church is so that we can grow spiritually, so we can grow our faith, because nobody is perfect, right? We all are on a journey to try to get better, and sometimes that journey is forward and backward, and then trying to go forward again. And so my hope and what I would expect is the expectation from a parishioner is that we are doing the things to help them spiritually grow. And if we're not doing that, I hope they're also giving us that feedback. And the feedback isn't just gossip and complaining to my friends. the feedback is coming back and saying, I need this. Father Basilio, Father Christian, Father Jonathan, Parish Council members, I'm looking for this and I don't have this. I believe this would help me grow spiritually. How can we get there? And then we can be active. We can take the steps to help that person, those persons, grow spiritually. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. That's what we're about. That's what we're trying to do, is live our lives as Christians and grow closer to God.
You bring up such a great point that I think my mom and my parents instilled in my sister and I growing up, was that being an Orthodox Christian wasn't just something we did on Sundays. It's something you do throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, throughout your whole life. And of course, we want people here on Sundays, we want people to worship, but that should be the basis. You know, if we're going to build a community of believers, I would venture to say that communities don't just gather one day a week. You know, I've always told this to people when they've asked about, you know, the Orthodox Church. Yes, it's the Orthodox Church, but the church is based off the faith, and the faith is a way of life. It's not just something we show up on a Sunday morning and do. So I think that's important, you know, as a parish council to say, you know, amidst everything that we're charged to do as a council, one of the things we want to ensure is that, you know, these people are giving their stewardship. But really, for the most part, that stewardship is your time and your talent. Because at the end of the day, like you said, I mean, people can send in money, but not feel like they're engaged and purposely not be engaged in the life of the church.
Right.
And I don't know, I've never asked God this, but I would venture to say that he would much rather you show works with your faith aside from just writing a check. Because, you know, we're taught to love one another, and it's very hard to love one another when you're not a part of that engaged and active community. So it's refreshing to hear that there's an emphasis on, yeah, of course, we need to be better stewards, we need to be better controllers of our money in order to give money to the church, because we need to feed the institution that feeds us. But, like we said before, it's also really important that, you know, we speak more about Christ just other than the money that we give to the church, so that it really is a full steward that we are encouraging as just opposed to a financial contributor.
Yeah, and I guess I just encourage folks to just look introspectively, right? Just think about their level of engagement and what they want. I would venture to bet that people are, I've experienced it and I've seen this, but people are much happier when they are engaged in this community and know that they're doing their part. How do you feel if you know that you have not done your part? It doesn't feel good to know that we've not done our part. None of us want to just coast by and just hang on to the coat strings of our fellow man. And so we have to think about what our part is. Everybody's part is different. Everybody's talent is different. Everybody's financial ability is different. And if we stop and that's why it's so challenging for us as an administrative body to say, this is what you have to do. Because it's not clear. You know, years ago, there was a set fee to be a member of the church. Then there was a period where we talked about another number, that if everybody gave this number, it would be enough. Well, the reality is we have folks that are have abundant financial capability. And we also have others that don't have as abundant financial capability. But those others may have a profound talent that they can share. So for them, the equation is, they give their component financially, but then they give their heart and their talent and their time. Whereas somebody else still probably has a talent. It's probably why they're well off financially, but they can give more financially and maybe help in other ways, right? And so there's no clear answer of this is what you have to do to be a member. Maybe that's not true. The clear answer is you have to look inside and you have to decide what you're capable of. What I learned being on the stewardship committee and being on the parish council, I became active. I started to learn the ins and outs of how the church ran, how it didn't run. And I started to think about it internally. What can I do? And I also started being purposeful. And I say that I started being purposeful with my financial giving because I was active. I've been active since '87, participating in various components of the church. But I wasn't financially giving, nowhere near where I could. Well, from where I was to where I am today, it was a big leap for me to go. I couldn't have done it in a matter of a day, a week, or month. It was a purposeful intention to say, I'm going to increase and I'm going to do this purposefully. So I commit every year, and now once we got married, Sophia and I commit. Every year we sit down and we decide, okay, we're going to up it up. We're going to notch it up a little bit more. We did it. We found God provided. We've done magnificently. We can absolutely do a little bit more. Okay, let's do a little bit more. And we crank that dial up a little bit more every year. And what I've found is it's come back tenfold. We've been extremely blessed. I've found it extremely easy to give significantly more than I ever thought I could. And I'm still not doing enough. I know that.
Yeah.
We can all look at ourselves and figure that out. But I ask that people just start by having that conversation in the mirror. Just start when we do, like Father Christian said today, and practice one of the maxims. Practice silence, both internally and externally. When we get into those moments and we carve out those times and we are silent, and we start, invariably, we still keep thinking, but let's just think about, all right, what does it mean to us? What makes us happy? To know that we're doing our part for the community, to know that we're establishing a foundation for our kids, for our grandkids, for our future generations, to know that we are putting the church on stable foundations so that we can expand and we can do the things for our community that we truly can do, where we can pivot and stop thinking about what it takes to fix and stabilize and get our house in order, and we can really start looking outward. And what can we do for our community? What can we do for homeless, for those in need, for those that don't have the gifts that we do?
And to tie it back to something you said at the beginning of the show, it's those still moments that we have with God, whether it's in the church, whether it's looking in the mirror, whether it's in prayer. I often think of the saying from our Holy Fathers, and I think it might be in Scripture, be still and know that I am with you. And it's in those moments of stillness that, like you said, we really do feel the faith. We feel the presence of God in us. And if we find a little bit more, like Father Thomopoulos in his maxims, if we find more opportunities for that stillness, then we really become more Christ-like with theosis. And I know that through those moments of stillness and through the concerted efforts and the work and the dedication of our parish councils, that you guys will, continue to lead us during these challenging times. But frankly, during times that I think are very bright for Holy Trinity and for the cathedral and for the Orthodox community in Charlotte in general. And as we prepare to celebrate 100 years of ministry and of the witness of Christ in Charlotte, and specifically the last several decades here on 600 East Boulevard, I know that the light that shines from this community will continue to shine brighter. And we thank you so much for your witness and for your testimony and your work that you're doing, and God willing will continue to do. And we thank you for being on the show today.
I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the work you're doing. As I mentioned, everybody's got their talents and their interests, and this is one of yours, and I think it's beautiful. I hope you continue it, and I hope you find others with a similar interest and you can expand on it. So, because here's the reality, our community is vast, and it is covered with varying opinions and backgrounds and experiences. And the more we learn about each other, the more we recognize that we are family. And so I think this is an important first step in everybody getting to know each other. I hope more folks are willing participants. I hope this becomes a regular occurrence, and we start to meet the various members of our parish. Because I know there's a lot of them, and they've got profound stories. I look forward to hearing them.
That's the truth. That's the truth. And hopefully many more stories to continue for the next 100 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
And we thank you for joining us today on the first episode of The Ark. Be sure to join us next month as we meet yet another interesting person here from Holy Trinity Cathedral, and we learn more about the stories of the folks who make up The Ark. Until next month, be good and be one with God. Thank you.